can be overwhelming, right?
Absolutely.
So I think,
Only on days that end in Y. The rest of them
yes,
are okay.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed with it, that we get stuck. And then when we get stuck, we don't know how to push outside of that a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, what are some thoughts that you can give us in that situation? What you got someone today that, let's just say, we're not really well with time, with with what we do, because I
Hmm.
think a lot of people look at it at what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to plan out every aspect of my day today? Am I, what am I
Hmm.
supposed to do with that? And if it's something that you've never done in your life, this can sound foreign to you, you know.
Sure.
But what are
Yeah.
some simple techniques that might help us
So
in that
let's
journey?
talk both philosophical and kind of practical for a minute. So philosophically first, most time management stuff, okay, and again, I prefer the term productivity management or energy
Mhm.
management or focus management, but let's just call it time management because that's what everybody else calls it, and that way everybody kind of knows what we're talking about. Any of those sorts of tools, you go to this course or you buy this book or you read that. Most of them are actually written by people who are very driven by rules, regulations, process, standards. Those are the kind of people that are attracted to the topic. So,
Right.
by the way, that's how
Correct.
I'm wired. So my natural inclination is I from 8:02 to 8:04, I'm doing this and this
Yes.
and that's my natural inclination. Problem is, we don't live in a world that was designed that way. you
Correct.
know, there's really more than just that. And so part of the problem and frustration that people have is they're reading all these tips and techniques that are written to a relatively small segment of the population who's wired that way, and they're wired differently, and then they're trying to figure out, now wait, how do I do this because this doesn't work for me? And that's where a lot of the frustration comes from. And so the first thing I actually say is that where you start is get to know yourself. That could be, a DISC assessment. I'm actually certified in the DISC personality insights kind of material. It could be Enneagram. It could be Myers-Briggs. Doesn't matter. It could be Strengths Finder. The idea is all of these are models, and all models are incomplete and somewhat inaccurate because that's what makes them a model. And if
Right.
they were completely accurate, they would be the real thing. They wouldn't be a model. So, it doesn't
Right.
work that way. But what you're doing is getting insight on yourself and beginning to learn who you are. And so one of the first tips is what I call the 15-minute miracle. You can do this as the 30-minute miracle. The time frame really doesn't matter. But what it is just take a sheet of paper
Yeah.
and write the times down on the left-hand side every 15 minutes. And then especially if you've got like a watch that has a silent alarm, or you could put a silent alarm on your phone, literally put an alarm to go off every 15 minutes, preferably silently so you don't disturb all the people around you, but
Yep.
something that notifies you. And every 15 minutes, just jot down on that piece of paper, what did you spend that last 15 minutes doing? Doesn't have to be in detail. I'm not asking you to write a 12-paragraph essay, but 5, 6, 7 words. What did I kind of spend my time this last 15 minutes doing? Well, I checked Facebook, I went on Twitter, then I did this, then I did that. I checked email, I went and got coffee, whatever it is you did, just jot it down. Do that for 3 to 5 days, maybe even 7 if you want to kind of push it. And then go back and look at what you spent your time doing and kind of
Yeah.
maybe get some highlighters and color code it. Figure out, where are you actually spending your time?
Mhm.
You're gonna be surprised.
Yeah.
Okay. Because trust me, I've never had anyone do this that comes back afterwards and is like, oh, I did not realize I was spending that much time doing that. By
Right.
the way, it doesn't matter what that is. It's just the idea that, again, you were being unintentional in your use of time. And by tracking it, it begins to open up this idea of, now maybe I need to change.
Yeah.
We could talk about some of the techniques to make that change as well, but that's that first step of knowing yourself, knowing where you're spending your time, beginning to reflect on that, because the techniques you use might be a little different. I mean, I'll give you some examples, but they don't always implement exactly the same way for every person, because guess what? We're all different. We all have different wiring. We have a different, if you've got young kids at home, your morning is a really different routine than
Yes.
when you've got an empty nest situation and no kids at home.
Yes.
Anyone who has young children was sitting there right now going, testify, trust me, I know, because that's just the, getting 3 kids under the age of 5 to church on Sunday will cause you to lose your religion.
Yes.
Yes. This is not what you do. So that's part of it too, is understanding the reality of where you are, how you're wired, so that when you learn these tools, you can kind of tweak them or implement them with some grace, because your life might be a little different than the person down the street.
And I like that, because one of the things I think we as Christians sometimes do is we think everything's cookie cutter, and we're all the same way. And no, my walk in my life is so different than your walk, because we're totally different people. But the reason why this is so valuable to you is because I'm a true believer. You cannot fix something that you don't know where the problems are.
Absolutely.
So by doing this, you can see, because I know for some people, one of my problems was when I did this, but I didn't know I was doing it.
Right.
I didn't have someone like you to tell me to lay it out. But I realized that I was not being productive. I realized, that my life, I wasn't doing the things I wanted to do. And then I realized how much wasted time I had, like how much time I was watching television versus I could have been reading or doing the goals that I had in place. And I think sometimes the problem is we find out when we went through that our goals are really not structured very well. We don't really know what our goals are that we want to reach. And so therefore we have a lot of wasted time because we have no vision of where we want to go,
It's the difference between setting a resolution and having a goal. One of the reasons New Year's resolutions don't work is because it's a resolution. It's not a goal. A goal has some specificity, some concreteness, some, measurability, I always tell people goals are important, but by clear, definition, they have a beginning, a middle, and an end. You have something that you're going to do, and at the end of it, if you've done it or not. Things like losing weight, which people resolve, right? I resolve that my money will be in order this year. Well, what does that even mean?
Yes.
How do you know when that's done? How do you know when you started? It's too ambiguous. Now, there's nothing wrong with dreams and resolutions and those sorts of things at the early stages, but at some point you have to take them again intentionally from I want this to happen into no, this is going to happen, and here's the way it's going to happen.
Right. One of mine, I wrote a book this past year, and it just came out.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I'm not that talented or that smart, right? I think. But I was like, the next thing I know, once I knew that was where God was leading me, and I was writing this book, then I sat down and, I was like, I can do this. And I'm like, I want to do this. And so now I set the time aside. I made sure that I was, like you said, the intentionality was set there. I had a beginning, I had a middle, I had an end. When do I want to have this accomplished by? How do I get to there? What do I need to do? And every day, I was like, okay, so every day you're going to spend this much time writing your book and putting toward this, or doing research and doing this and that. And then before I knew it, I thought it would take me a year to write this book. I had this book done within 2 to 3 months. Because I had a vision, and now I laid it out, and I could do it. And now I could put everything else into place, because one of the things, like for me, I do these podcasts now. God's changed my whole world, but I found out now how important my time is, because I don't want to neglect the things and the people who are important to me too, because now I've got my family. I need to make sure that I have carved out time every day for my wife. I make sure that I have the time for my job, that things are not affecting my job, right? But I still am reaching my goals, and doing it,
Right.
So
Right.
I like how you put that out, because one thing is, if you don't know where your time's going, you don't know how to redirect it as well.
Right. Right. And oftentimes that first step is still that know yourself stage before you even set the goal. Because, for instance, if you don't know you're spending too much time watching Netflix, well, you're never going to have a goal to watch less Netflix because you don't even know it's a problem. So
Correct.
why would I set that as a goal? Why would I have that intention? So, and I'm picking on Netflix. I'm using that as an
Right.
example. And by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with watching TV or checking
No.
Facebook or whatever. It's not the activity that's good or bad. It's whether or not, again, to use your word, intentionality, whether or not we're coming in and saying, this is time that I've set aside to
Right.
veg out and watch TV.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
But what's bad is when you're watching TV and going, I don't have time to write my book, or I don't have time to spend with my kids, or I don't have
Right.
time to whatever. In reality, you have that time, you're just using it in another way. So I actually don't like the phrase, I didn't have time. I
Mhm.
always tell people instead, reframe that in your mind as this isn't a priority.
Yeah. And that's great, because what I found out for me was, I did have the time. I was allowing, like, television, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
to it was my escape from reality,
Right.
probably. And what was happening, I was neglecting some things that were important to me,
Right.
because I wasn't in control of it. And I'm with you. There's nothing wrong with watching television. There's nothing wrong with carving out time for leisure time, because what's the point in having all this stuff if we can't enjoy our life as
Right.
well?
Well,
So there's
and that's where changing that phrasing to this isn't a priority to me is helpful. Because if you start saying to yourself, God has put it on my heart that I'm supposed to write a book, but Netflix is a bigger priority to me right now than writing a book. That's going to create a lot of cognitive dissonance. Your
yes,
brain is like, whoa, wait a minute, really? Netflix is more important than this? You're feeling called to do
yes,
this, and yet Netflix is more important. Or I can't make it to my kid's baseball game, because work is a bigger priority.
right,
I mean, if that's a true statement, fine, then go work. Because there are times in your life where that may actually literally be true.
correct,
You are in a
correct,
situation where, for monetary reasons, for whatever, you have to put work. But that then also allows you to communicate that with those people that you love and you care about. So instead of feeling like, dad's never home, he's always at
yeah,
work, they know this is a season or this is a period of time. Because if it turns into an always thing, eventually not making the kids ball game is no longer a problem, because
yeah,
that things have changed, and you've really let your life go that direction. And we all know people and places, and that's happened to me, where I've gone through a long period of time where, no, it wasn't that I didn't have enough time, it's that my priorities were all screwed up.
yeah,
I was putting priorities to the wrong things. But when you start saying that out loud instead of
mhm,
I didn't have time, it begins to force you to go, ooh,
yes,
I'm choosing this over that. Is that really what I want to do?
yes,
You know, and then you can begin to make changes. Then you can begin to implement things to actually change what you're doing.
yeah. And I like what you said, because it's really authentic in what you're saying. It's being real, because sometimes, yeah, sometimes work has to,
Yeah,
for a season, jump at. Now, it is a problem if this is how it's going to always be. Then I might have to check. Well, then I might need a new job. You
right.
know, I might need to prioritize, because
Something else has to change.
correct.
Yeah,
And so we have to look at it. But you know what? There are seasons in our life where some things, it's just for a small season that this is happening. But what I like about that, if you can recognize that, then you can communicate that
mhm,
in the other areas, so that your wife doesn't feel neglected. Like, there's some days
right,
when I be doing 3 podcasts that day, which is unusual, but I might say, "Hey, I'm doing 3," but I'll communicate that with my wife. "Hey, tonight,
right.
this is what my day looks like," you know, um, and then, but we make sure then we set aside tomorrow,
Right.
but tomorrow I have carved out, I don't have any podcast going on tomorrow, and we can spend some time together to do this and that. Because to her, then that's important because that brings value to her, that I'm
Hmm.
value her relationship, but and it's just simple. It's communicating it. And I think sometimes we lack the communication to the other people because that's to me, that's why um prioritizing my time is so important to me because one, I want to be intentional in what I'm doing, but also I want to spend time in the areas and the people that I value. I had
Right.
neglected those for years, and I don't want to ever go back to that again. I want to have healthy boundaries in my life doing this, right? And so I like what you said though, because a lot of times it's an all or nothing thing, and people are like, "Well, I can't let my work. I had to tell my boss this." Well, was it for a one time thing? Was it just for a small season that you needed to do that? Then that's what you do, I know people that well, I had to do this because my it was gonna take me away from church that day.
Hmm. And
Well,
again, that could be perfectly valid too.
right.
There, this isn't about, because again, I, from outside, it's hard for me to come into anyone's
Yes.
life and say
Yes.
that's the decision that you should have made. I do this whether I'm working with people on time or money. A lot of times people will look at me and they're like, "Well, what should I cut out?" It's like,
Yes.
I can't tell you that. I mean,
Well,
I
and I
can
think
walk you through a process to decide, but it's not for me to come in and look at your list and go, "Oh, that's not important. That's not important. And that's not important."
thank you for
Instead, it's how do you
clarifying that.
decide,
Yeah, and thank you
Yeah,
for clarifying that too, because, a lot of times that's what we do. We want people to tell us
right,
what to do. And the thing is, this is about you taking control of your life, and your life is your priorities are not gonna be the same priorities I have, and that's
right,
okay, because you have a different life than me,
right.
you know?
Well,
What's important to you?
I think one of the things that we do, and this is one of those, this is actually I'm working on a book right now. And again, one of those things of knowing yourself. I knew that I was never going to sit down and write a book. So I'm actually working with a friend of mine who helps people write books. Because
Mhm.
for me, I knew with my wiring, with my personality, with the way I work, that's going to get me where I want to go.
Right.
And one of the topics that's kind of bubbling in the undercurrent of the book, because we're still in the early phases, is I think a lot of times, and it's a very Western thing, but we do it where we try to make things into either or, either this or that, either up or down, black or white,
Yeah.
good or bad, all of that. And I think God oftentimes sets things up much more often to be both and, where we want something to be good or bad, and the truth is it's both. It's not purely evil and it's not purely righteous, or it's not purely good or purely bad. It's much more about our relationship with those things than it is the things themselves. We try to make money, money is the root of all evil. No, the love of money is the root of
Yes.
all evil. It's
Yep.
that relationship piece. Same thing happens with time. We try to make time into this very concrete, black and white, up, down, good, bad, when in reality, it's a lot more fluid than that. And it's about that relationship we have with our priorities, with our values, with other people, with work, with, whatever, that allow us to come to a point of, and I don't even like the word balance so much. I've begun to more often than not use the word harmony, because it's really about, because balance implies sameness or equality in some way,
Mhm.
where harmony, if you think about harmony and rhythm and music, it's not sameness. There's a regularity to it, there's a pattern to it, but it's not all the same either. A song made of only one note would be kind of boring.
Right.
And our lives are like that too. We're not one dimensional. We don't have a one note life. We have a harmony. And when it works well, everything's harmonious. And when it doesn't, that's when that one instrument is out of tune, or that one thing is out of tune.
Mm. Well, I like that because exactly. I mean, I obviously like music,
I
and
was going to say, you got
you
instruments
know,
behind you.
so so you were speaking my language right there, which that made it very clear to me. I I would like this before we close,
Mhm.
because we like you said, this is a topic we could talk about all day. I think
Mhm.
one thing is point out this first. It's really important. Take the first step. If you know that how you're prioritizing your time is a problem, then only you are the one who can change that. And so, you know, take the process, look at the process that you laid out for us today. Kind of look at that, see if that's what we can. Also, look at resources. There's all sorts of resources available out there. You actually have a site dedicated to
Mhm.
this, So I want to make sure that we plug that in here and make sure that's in our description and stuff so people have that where they can go and get that resource. But I also want to talk, there's a payoff to doing this. There's a payoff to this. And the payoff, and you tell me your thoughts on the payoff. I think the payoff here is you're going to gain so much more in your life that you don't have because you're managing it, you're prioritizing it in the right way. You're accomplishing a whole lot more of what you wanted to accomplish instead of saying, "Man, I wish I would have got that done," or "I wish I
Mhm.
would have accomplished this." Now you're going to look and say, look what I've done. Look what how God's moving in my life." Because I think sometimes we keep God from moving in our lives because God can't break through the stubbornness that we have and not moving and not
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of blessings that come from getting your time in order and getting that sort of balance. Some of it is just the what I call peace and flow, right? Just the idea of there's more harmony, there's more peace, there's more rhythm to your life. Again, does that mean every day works out perfectly and nothing ever goes wrong? Of course not. I mean, that's not what we're promised in our walk.
Right.
We're nothing. It's like, I always love the people that are like, God promises a perfect life. It's like, have you read the Bible? That's
Yes.
not in there,
Yes.
nowhere. But that's not what we're promised. But what we are promised is if we get our relationships right, then we will have a sense of peace, even when everything's not going well, even when there's problems. It's not, and that doesn't mean you never get angry or you never get frustrated, or you never get upset,
Right.
but there's still that sense of underlying, but this is still the direction I'm supposed to be going. There's still that call or that drive, that direction. Because I think a lot of times we confuse, contentment with complacency.
Yep.
And being complacent is looking at everything and just going, well, there's nothing I do about it anyway. I can't
Mm.
change it. So I'm just going to just bebop through world and let everything happen to me.
Yep.
And contentment is I'm still happening to the world. I'm still doing things. I'm still driven. I've still got a direction in my life. But you know what? When it works out, I'm going to be happy.
Yep.
And I'm going to be okay with that. And when it doesn't work out, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be
Yes.
okay with that. It's not, I'm not invested in the result. I'm invested in the process or the journey or the relationship instead. And
Yes.
when you can get to that state, and trust me on this one, I will be the first one to testify that I am not perfectly there by any stretch of the imagination. That is still a journey that I am on every day. But when I get to those places, that's where flow happens. That's where, the connection happens. That's where it feels like, I'm finally actually stewarding this in a way that God will look down at me and say, well done, good and faithful servant. You're doing a good job
Yes.
today, and that's what I'm after, is more days like that and fewer like the other days that we
Yes.
all have,
And I like that because life is not perfect. We are not
Oh,
going to do this
mhm.
perfectly. And the whole point in this is just so that we can try to accomplish it better than what we currently
Right.
are. And that should be the goal every day. I want to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. I want to move a little further in this than what I did. And for me, this has been a 15-year journey for me. I am actually in this point in my life where I have that peace and joy, but it took a lot of hard work to get there.
Right.
Um, I've lost over 90 pounds now this
Awesome.
year, you know. I wrote a book, I wrote a devotional. I'm like, my family is really doing good. We spend so much time together. And but I have to be protective of it too,
Correct.
and not be rigid in all this. I tend to be very legalistic. I get in that thing, and then I'm like, "Oh, gotta do this," and life just isn't that way. And I like the fact how you define priority versus time management, because time management, we can tend to be very rigid in what we're doing,
Right.
prioritizing it, because you're right. Sometimes priorities have to be intermingled sometimes,
Right.
just for those seasons and everything.
And they have ebb
But
and flow.
yes,
Yeah.
and that's okay, and you've got to be able to go with it. But
So
once you do, you're going to see
go
your
ahead.
life change, you know.
So real quick, because you mentioned that little bit better every day. So that if and I just want to ask you, if you got 1% better every single day on something, okay, you just improved by 1% in a month. Okay, I'll give you the answer. In a month, you would be about 37% better.
Yeah,
Okay, so how much better would you be after a year? If in a
right.
month you would be 37% better. No, this is not a rhetorical question. Make a guess. If it's 37% in 1 month, after 365 days of 1% better each and every day, how much better would you be at the end of the year?
I would say about 100% better, because
So 15, it's a 5 followed by 15 zeros
wow, wow,
percent. Okay. It's a 5 followed by, it's the idea of compounding. We forget
uh-huh,
how powerful compounding is. 1% on 1% on 1% on 1% on 1% on 1%. In a month, it's about 37, 38% better, right? So it feels like, well, it would be bigger after a year, but not that much bigger. No, it's like astronomically bigger.
yes,
Okay. It's a 5 followed by 15 zeros. That just blows my mind. Now, the truth is, it's not going to be that, because we don't literally get better
right,
1% each and every day. It's up and down and herky
right.
jerky. But it still gives us that concept of, because a lot of times people are like, well, if all I'm doing to do is improve a little bit, who cares? Think
Yeah,
about it. 1% better each and every day
yeah,
would compound to massive change over a year. We grossly overestimate how much we can get done in a day,
yep,
and we grossly underestimate how much we can get done in a year.
yep. And I think for a lot of people too, they get overwhelmed because they always want to look at the end picture.
Right.
Take it one day. Just worry about today. You can't do
All you
nothing
need is the
till
next.
tomorrow. Yeah, so do today, and then you'll get to tomorrow,
Hmm.
And it's I can't tell you, I mean, how great, just in the last 2 years, how different my life is for the better, and how the peace that I have. And I still
Hmm.
have hard times that come. I still have struggles. I still have things that, I mean, right now, this week, we got some chaos stuff going on. But in the midst of chaos, guess what? We still have peace. We still have joy. You
Hmm.
know, we're not letting that cripple us. Whereas before, I catastrophized everything. And I think too, in the past, I think a lot of people use excuses. We look at it and we're like, I'll never be able to do it, so therefore I'm not going to do it. Well,
Right.
yeah, if you aim at nothing, you're going to reach nothing every time. You've got to put the excuses aside and just say, you know what? Yeah, because if you look at it, you're going to have all sorts of reasons why. Don't look at
Right.
the reasons why not. Look at the things that you can do today.
Well, if you find yourself doing what I call the 3 Ps, this is when you need to make a change, and whether that's on your own, whether you get help, from a counselor, coach, pastor, whatever, your spouse, whatever it is, it's a time to make a change. And the P's are when something happens and you make it personal, permanent, and pervasive. Okay, so personal is when something went wrong and you don't say this failed, you say I'm a failure.
Yeah.
Right, you're personalizing it. Permanent not only am I a failure, I fail at everything. Everything I've ever tried, everything I will ever try, it's there. And pervasive is not only did I fail at this one thing, I fail at everything. My
Mhm.
relationship's horrible. It's a country song, right? Everything's going wrong. Those three things, when you start to find yourself doing one or more of those, that's where you got to get back in here and go, nope, this is a head change. This is a heart change. This is a spiritual thing. I need to find a way to shift that thinking, because automatically, if you find yourself doing those three things, that's the path to stuck. And the path to unstuck is to change those mindsets.
I love that. I love that. That's some gold right there. Well, Scott, listen, we're running out of time. I want to ask you if you take just a few moments and tell us about your website and what
Sure.
how they can navigate that.
Sure. So the best place to find me is actually inspiredstewardship.com. I actually set up a special page just for anyone hearing this, anyone listening to this. You can go there. It's at inspiredstewardship.com/intentional. And basically, I'll have some free resources there, some things for time, some things for money. We've talked mainly today about time, and so that 15-minute miracle exercise and a few other just free gifts that might be able to help you kind of get unstuck and get started using it better will be there. There'll also be a way if you want to just jump on a 30-minute call with me and talk more about coaching and what I do, or get some specific questions answered. I'll open myself up to your listeners for that as well.
Oh, that's
And
awesome. And we'll make sure it's in our description as well so they can just click right to it and everything.
perfect.
Well, listen, Scott, thank you so much for being on here today. I hope you guys listening will take some of this and apply it to your life and look at it, because I think, to me, this was a game changer in my life, doing this and looking at how I prioritize all that. So hopefully this will help some of you where you're at today. But until next time, I just want to tell you, keep being intentional. We'll talk to you later.